Tonight we're going to be doing a presentation on transformative family engagement, and we are so very lucky to have Tracy Potts with us here today. She's going to be moderating this presentation, and she's also going to be joined by Aize Sabater. She's the Action in Montgomery and Morgan State Family Engagement Researcher, and also Tiona Rogers, former Springbrook Cluster Coordinator and Broad Acres PTA President. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Potts now and let her do her show. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here. How many of you as PTA leaders have ever thought, you know, I need to get more families involved. I need to get more families engaged. I have 3 people at my PTA meeting, or everybody who's on my board are the only people who show up for my PTA meetings. Or heaven help you have an event and there's always that moment when you've planned and you've done things and then you're kind of, you know, holding your fingers wondering, is anybody going to show up for this? So that's a little bit about what we want to talk about. I am sort of a homegrown PTA leader. I'm a parent in the Northeast Consortium, but also more recently I've become a fellow with the National PTA Center for Family Engagement. This is something new that National PTA is doing. They've selected 4 of us around the country to really act as ambassadors in our community. They're having us act as advisors to some of the work that they're doing on a national level. They're having us review research, but the real thing they want us to do is events like this. They want us to go into our own communities with large groups and small groups and just talk about what family engagement is, and specifically transformative family engagement. We'll get into that because what they're trying to do is shift a little bit into doing what we've been doing a little bit differently and a little bit better. It's not that we have not been doing family engagement, but we just want to ramp it up a bit. So the first thing I'd like to do is give you a sneak peek of something that you're going to see in a few weeks, actually, during Take Your Family to School Week. There are new videos that the center has put together to really sort of roll out this new effort and explain what transformative family engagement is. And they're not quite done, but I got a copy for you. So we're gonna watch that. It's a very short 3-minute video. And while you're watching it, think about how this applies to your PTA experience, and we'll talk about that after.
Transformative family engagement is at the core of National PTA's Center for Family Engagement.
Transformative family engagement is something I've been thinking about for months, and it is different from traditional family engagement. We're PTAs. We do family engagement well. We know how to pack a room. We know how to get people into the school. But then what happens next?
So our mission is to ensure that every child's potential becomes a reality, and this is by engaging and empowering our families and communities to be able to advocate for their children and for all children. And so with the ever-changing world, our families are busier than ever before. They are processing and they're consuming information at a different rate and at a faster rate than ever before. And our nation's population is more diverse than ever before. And we really need to be able to meet that demand for transformative family engagement.
I often wonder, do other folks feel as comfortable going in and saying, this is what I need for my child, this is what I'm observing, and going in with confidence, whether it's a teacher conference or back to school meeting or a special meeting around a need my child might have. I realize that I may have some tools that others don't have, and I want to make sure that every parent in our community has the ability to advocate for their child in that way, and so I think that's a large part of our job.
And so now, in 2018, we have so many families that have parents, either both parents working 1 or 2 jobs. We have some parents that are single-family parents, and we have now grandparents raising grandchildren. And that's actually a situation that I'm in personally. We have been raising my almost 5-year-old granddaughter since she's 6.5 months old. And so I'm thinking about, to be able to help her, how am I going to be able to do this as an individual who works full-time and may not have the same opportunities to get into the school as I did when I had my own children. So we need to look at something that is totally different, totally exciting, that will really engage the parents. And I think if you Think about the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. And if we continue to do things the way we have been doing them, then we're not going to be successful in reaching our parents. So we do need a transformation.
I think we have to be more transformative in including all families so that we can help to achieve a level of equity among our students, making sure that every student is thought of, they're cared for, their families' concerns are present in the work that we do, and so that we're making sure that we are representing all of the children in our school and all of their diverse needs as we advocate for children and try to uplift them through their education and engage their families.
Yes, there's ways that we have done things in the past. Oh my gosh, there's all of those ideas, et cetera. But at the end of the day, be creative. We've given you a new platform, a new identity, a new opportunity to actually be welcoming, to be inclusive, and to most importantly be creative. Be a great thought leader in the sense of how can you actually take this transformative family engagement, work it within your school, and actually critically think through this entire process and reach out to your entire community.
Equity and effectiveness. These are essential to great transformative family engagement. If you want to learn more about transformative family engagement, go to pta.org/family engagement.
So let's talk briefly about what you heard there, the types of words that we're using to describe family engagement. Transformative, different, engaging, equity, okay, welcoming, inclusive. They indicate that over time, we've been missing people. So this is an effort to sort of go back with our traditional PTA model, but to go back and make sure that as we continue to do great events, as we continue to partner with our schools, that we're bringing everyone along in that process. So what I want to do now is just take a few minutes to walk you through sort of our definitions and how we think this effort should work. This is a presentation that's been put together by the Center for Family Engagement at National PTA with the help of myself and the other fellows. So first of all, we have already sort of done the welcome and the introductions. We want to talk about why we want to be transformative. Transformative meaning changing the way that we're doing things, what it really means, and what the 4 I's are, 4 keys to making your engagement transformative. And then we'll wrap it up. And then we have a couple of exciting things for you, a couple of people here to speak to you and give you an opportunity to ask them some questions because they've been involved in this type of work right here in Montgomery County. So we'll have a panel for you to engage with tonight. First of all, why be more transformative? In our research, what we found is that the world is changing, the world around our families, the world within our schools. So we can't really effectively use the same model that we've been using in PTA and communities to engage families. The world is changing, the people are changing, we're different. And families are also telling us that they want more out of PTA. What is our traditional PTA model? Like the 7 o'clock PTA meeting, right? That doesn't work at all schools. We'll talk about that a little bit on the panel tonight. But also, families are asking for more depth from their PTA. They like coming to movie night and they like coming to interesting presentations, but they want something more. And so we want to try to meet that need. That's what our research is showing. Family engagement matters for student success, but what we're finding in the research is some models work better than others, and we have an example to show you of that. And then finally, this has always been part of PTA's mission. I say this to people all the time. PTA is not just about fundraising, okay? It's not just about meetings. It is about getting families engaged, empowering them to advocate for their own children and for all children in the process. And so we want to get back to that core mission, making sure that our PTAs understand that we are here and our mission is to empower families, to make sure that that mom, that grandmother that you just heard from, a foster parent, whoever is the support for that child, a cultural or generational leader or elder, whoever is supporting that child, feels empowered to speak up in that school setting for that child. So, kind of the big picture here is when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and they think, we don't want to do that, and some people build windmills. And so we're here to be a windmill in that process to kind of help blow everyone along with this process. So, what's the official definition of transformative family engagement? It's a shared effort of families, schools, and community leaders to advance programs, practices, policies that empower every parent to make their child's potential a reality, which is part of the original mission of PTA. So let me show you very briefly. I said I had one video, but I actually am going to squeeze in part of another one. The academic parent-teacher team meeting is one example of what we're talking about. I'm going to play a short portion of this video and then explain to you a little bit about why this is relevant to this conversation.
My job as a man, as a parent, as a father, is to educate my baby girl, my youngest daughter, and grandchild to prepare them for life. The reason why I came is I do believe that a parent should be involved in their kids' education. And you know, if the teachers take the time to plan, if the staff take the time to actually plan, like a session like we had today here, then we should at least go ahead and give enough respect to show up.
So we had a lot of success with APTT1, right? A lot of students with sight words and multiplication facts, we went from like around 50% to like over 90%, right? And we couldn't have done that if you guys weren't like playing multiplication war, like making them write down their sight words every night. Like we couldn't have made that happen. If you could, as a table, just answer these 3 questions for me. What strategies do you use at home to make sure that your children are mastering the skills that you would like them to master, right? And just like last time when you came to the first APTT, we read all the charts and we take your considerations into account. So if you could just also let us know, what are some skills that you notice that your child is struggling with? Because we take these and read them, right? And it helps us with our instruction.
What did you say you did with the money and the ice cream truck? That was such a good strategy.
Thank you. So really quickly, we're just going to ask, and you can just, if you feel comfortable sharing some of the things that your group said, we're just going to popcorn out. Yes.
Work with the flashcards you gave us, and we also went over the list of words that you gave us.
How many other people did that? So that's a good best practice, right? To study the words over and over. Does anybody else have something else that they want to add that they thought was really good? Because I see a lot of things written on this paper.
The mathematics song.
Right, the multiple songs?
Yes.
Yeah. How many people are tired of kind of hearing their kids sing this? Right? And they sing it like all the time. Now that we've celebrated our successes, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of why we're here tonight.
So the goals of the meeting. By the end of tonight, you should be able to name the most critical reading and math skills that your child should know for the 4th grade. Explain your child's current progress in these skills. Set a SMART goal for literacy and math to work on for the next 60 days. Practice activities that will help your child meet those goals.
So I'm going to encourage you to go back and look at that entire video. It's about 12 minutes. I've seen it. It's very interesting. It was actually required viewing to become a National PTA Family Engagement Fellow. It's very interesting because it shows a different type of environment, a different type of setting for engaging families. This is a group that comes into schools and trains teachers how to run these meetings. A couple of things that are notable about it, it's highly interactive. So you can see that, and you'll see as you watch the rest of that video, they were interacting one-on-one with parents. It was really sort of like bringing the parents back to class. Because as PTAs, we often think about one way or one directional engagement. We want to give information to parents. But also, what are the teachers learning about the families, about the home life that they can incorporate into the classroom? So one thing that's very important about transformative family engagement is to make sure that it's two-way. You're just not sort of always throwing information and flyers and links at people, but we also want to make sure that the educators are learning from the process as well. It's personal. One of the things when you watch the rest of that video, you'll see is that every parent gets a personal folder of their child's achievement. So they show up for this evening meeting, they've signed up for it, they get personal information about their child. And again, as PTAs, when we partner with our schools or on our own, when we do events, we always want to try to include some sort of educational component to empower our families so that when they walk away that morning, that evening, they've learned something that can help their specific child. And that's something that's a little new because a lot of times we do sort of the big picture events. We do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the entire community, the entire school. But what parents are telling us is they're really concerned about their kid. And that makes sense, right? You get involved because your child is doing well in school and you want to support that, or your child is not doing well in school and you need support for that, or maybe there are issues at home or behavioral issues, or maybe you just aren't familiar with the school environment. People want to walk away with something in their hand or something in their head to help their specific child. So as you are planning your PTA activities, hopefully in partnership with your school, think about that. How can we, and sometimes it's just a really small thing, how can we tweak this to make sure that people walk away with something that's useful for their particular child? And then finally, what you'll see in that video is some of the tools that they gave. You heard them talking about flashcards. You heard them talking about songs they can sing at home to help their kids learn. You heard them talking about word lists. So these are some of the things that we want to think about. Even, if you're planning a movie night, but it's a movie night, oftentimes schools will do that as like sort of an icebreaker before test week. Have a handout there, or maybe sort of a 15-minute or a 10-minute icebreaker that gives that parent some tool or information that they can use to help their child at home. So I just want to run through what we consider the 4 I's that can make your family engagement more transformative. Make it inclusive, individualized, integrated, and focus on the impact. First of all, inclusive. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Is everyone valued? Does everyone's viewpoint and opinion matter? That sounds simple, but that's not always happening. And some of us, I've been a PTA leader, so I will put myself out there. Sometimes the leadership of our PTAs is not reflective of the people at our school. So taking that extra step to make sure that happens. Intentional relationship building. One way I used to love to do this, if you have the opportunity, everyone doesn't. I work overnight. That means I'm free during the day. And oftentimes I would just go sit in the office, like to help the secretaries. But the coolest things happen when you sit in the school office. People show up, they have questions, they have issues, and you find there's an opportunity, like even if you can do it for 30 minutes, there's an opportunity then to extend yourself and to kind of find out what's on the minds of the people that you represent. And you start to get a sense of who's included and who's not. So we want to look at our school's engagement strategy, question some of the assumptions that we're making, intentional relationship building. If there's someone who shows up at an event, sometimes people go, okay, well, I'll try that school thing, I'll try that PTA thing, but they come in and they're the person over in the corner. Let's always make sure we get to the person in the corner to pull them in and to pull in their diverse perspective in what we're doing. Individualized, we talked about this. There are ways that we can, again, do very simple things. For example, the APTT event where they gave a folder with specific grades and test scores and things like that. So the parent walks away knowing something about their individual child and not just sort of the big picture of what's happening in the classroom. Integrated. So what we want to do is go beyond one-time events and put the T in the PTA. We want to make sure that we include the teachers and the staff and the efforts that we're doing. I like to use myself as an example because I definitely don't like to point at other people. When I was a middle school PTA president, We did a Take Your Dads to School Day, and it was highly successful. So we got all of these dads to come. They lined up. They were giving these kids high fives as they came in. It was a very welcoming, high-energy event. It was very diverse. We got community leaders. The school board president was there. A bunch of dads showed up. Then when the kids went to class, we took them all in the library, and we said, so this is part of what we do. We want to draw you in to being engaged and involved in the school. We gave them a little information about PTA. We had, what do we always do when we have events? We had people sign a list, put down your name, put down your email, and then we didn't call them again. We didn't do anything. Now, that was one great event, but think about it from the perspective of the other person. A lot of times our members and our non-members, our potential members, need a little more hand-holding. Many of us are PTA leaders who've been doing this for a long time, years. Not all of us, but many of us. But some people really don't get what our purpose is in the school. So if they take the initiative to show up for something, then let's take the initiative to reach out and pull them back in. That was something that I learned by mistake, I guess you could say. And then finally, impact. In the end, is this individual or are these individuals better prepared to support their children? The bottom line here is we want to make sure that as PTAs, and this is a larger effort than just PTAs, but I'm speaking specifically to you because you're here because you're PTA leaders tonight. As PTAs, are we ensuring that the projects that we do, the events that we're doing at our school are designed to eventually have an impact in the classroom, to have an impact on student achievement? Not always directly, but sometimes, like the example that we saw, that could be directly. That type of event is something that a school and a PTA could co-sponsor. So we always want to make sure that while it may be high energy, it may be fun, it may draw in a lot of people. If we're lucky, I think we've all had those meetings and events where 3 people show up. But sometimes, you know, we hit the jackpot and we do a successful event. But then what's next? So it's not a complete change in what we're doing. It's just a little bit of a shift in focus. And then finally, influence. Think about when you leave here today, who else in your neighborhood, in your child's class, in your family, in your PTA, in your school, could you share this conversation with so that we can all begin to think a little differently about family engagement? There's more information online, and we will post this, this presentation so that you'll be able to get this information as well. So, thank you. So there are people in our community who've been thinking about this, so National PTA is not the first to do this, but we are trying to pull this effort together now to give it more broad appeal. But there are some people in our community who have been doing this type of work, and so I've brought them in to introduce them so we can have a bit of a conversation and to give you an opportunity to ask them some questions. You know, I always think when someone's done something, let's not reinvent the wheel, right? So let's give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about what they do. And then if you have a thought, a question, a comment, please be sure to use the microphones because this event is being recorded so that people who were not able to attend will be able to benefit from this later. And we want to make sure that they hear your questions. So please be sure to come to the microphones when we get to that point. All right, not so technically challenged. So my guests today are Tiona Rogers. Tiona is a PTA leader, a parent who I've worked with for several years now. She is in a nearby cluster. We're all part of the Northeast Consortium. And she is a former president at Broad Acres, which is now it has a very long name. Joanne Lelick at Broad Acres Elementary School.
Yep.
Did I get it right?
Nope. Backwards.
Okay.
Joanne Lelick Elementary School at Broad Acres.
Okay. See, that's why you're here. So. Thank you for coming.
Thank
and
you
then
for having me.
also a new friend who I've met who's actually done a lot of research in this area and has some really interesting insights. I read your paper. He's done a thesis on this. It's really interesting.
awesome.
Aize Salvatore, and tell me, you're a Morgan State PhD candidate. You also work with Action in Montgomery. So he's sort of an on-the-ground community organizer, right? Obama taught us what that term is all about. Not being political here, I'm just saying that was the first time I heard it. So we have a real-life community organizer here. So I want to ask you both, let me kind of start from the thought and the research end of this. And I know you obviously are on both sides of this, but can you tell us a little bit about the research that you've done and what have you learned that we don't know about what we should be doing to engage families?
So thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank God for life, and it's good to be here with each of you. So I think the research is clear, and it definitely speaks to exactly what your video spoke of, the transformative power that is available when parents are engaged. The disconnect that I am realizing is not many walk the walk. So folk talk it, but walking it and helping to make that connection to really tap into that parent transformative power. So let me give you a case in point. So I've been involved with going down to the Kerwin Commission hearings. I don't know how many folk are familiar with the Kerwin Commission. Mm-hmm. Perfect. So we're astute crowd here. That's beautiful.
They did their homework.
Yes, there you go. So they are supposed to be coming up with these cutting-edge policy recommendations on helping to make Maryland a first-class educational system. And they are putting in one of the categories tens of millions of dollars in early childhood education is the recommendation that they're making. However, in that recommendation, they don't have one dime to go towards family engagement. And so if you realize that there's a transformative power in family engagement, then wouldn't you even put 1% of the tens of millions of dollars to go towards training parents on how to effectively transition their child from home to school so that you're on the same page, and then help to educate the educators on how to work effectively with parents? And so they don't even have 1%. And so you can look at somebody's budget and tell what they're serious about. And so, again, the research is clear. I don't know that many policymakers realize the importance of putting their money where their mouth is. And so I think that's one of the things that parents, I think we would do well to advocate and say, okay, everybody's talking this thing about parental engagement, family engagement. The model that you even picked from is pulling on Dr. Joyce Epstein's research that looks at 6 typology ways of parents to be engaged, which is great, yet are you putting your money where your mouth is in terms of training families, training teachers how to work with families, and then also putting some money up to evaluate, training parents to evaluate how effective is their school at parental engagement. And so again, I think if you do those 3 things, you will see the transformative power of family engagement truly unleashed.
Okay, so let me ask you a quick question about that. I'm a visual learner, okay? So when you say put your money where your mouth is, that makes sense. Give me an example or draw a picture for me of what type of event, what type of program would that pay for?
So again, in this Kerwin Commission, for that early childhood, by year 7 or 8, they're expecting to put $300 million in early childhood. That's what their recommendation is. So if they put 1%, that's $3 million would go towards engaging parents, and we could sit down in a room as such and listen to what are the concerns that the parents have, do a listening session. So you hear what the parent, okay, well, I need some more help with math. Well, I need some more help with reading with my child. Okay, so then you can take those things that these parents on the ground said that they are interested in, and then you can bring in some resources to address specifically some of the things that those parents are bringing. So again, being very hands-on, listening to the concerns of the people, and then bringing in resources to help plug some of those gaps and iron out some of the wrinkles there. And so again, I think it's very simple, tangible ways that we could allocate resources and really help to tap into that transformative power of family engagement.
And one last thing, because I do want to get to Tiona.
Well, I wanted to piggyback on that.
Okay, please go ahead.
Well, at my school, it's a Title I school, and so what that means is that a lot of the funding comes from a program that filters to schools that the families fall below a certain income line, and so what happens is that their needs look a lot more different from families that would be in another part of the county. And so it is important that just making that connection as to what the needs may be. For some of my family, some of them were, again, when Tracy said she works at night, that was actually some of the concerns that our parents had. You know, they're not able to make it to a PTA meeting at 7 p.m. because they're actually taking a nap because they're getting ready to go to, you know, a 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. shift. So we decided that we would have flip-flop. We would do AM meetings. So they would come as soon as they dropped their kids off in the morning. After coming in at 7 a.m., getting their kids ready for school, they would drop their kids off, and they might be tired, but they're already at school. And so we would have a 9 o'clock meeting.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. meeting, provide a light breakfast, and they would get the information they need and also still feel connected to seeing their teachers. When we talk about resources, some of the parents wanted to get into the workforce but lacked certain skills. So what we did was we offered a computer class. So they would go through a 6-week just keyboarding for the folks who kind of wanted to go a little more advanced than keyboarding. Then we started getting into certain, let's create a resume, let's get you an email address, because funny enough, there's still people out here that don't have email addresses. They're not on computers every night. And so those things help them feel connected and actually takes a level of stress off of the parent, which directly impacts the students. When you feel like your hands are tied and you're really worrying about bills or you're worried about other just life, you're just trying to make life happen. And so you tend to separate home from school. You're the mom, you're the dad, and you want to feed your kid when they get home. You're not necessarily focused on homework. You're feeling as though teachers should focus on teaching your kid. And so that's where the huge disconnect can sometimes happen. It's not because someone doesn't want to, it's because they're not necessarily knowing how they can, jump in 2 feet first. And when we talk about resources, we can talk about, maybe, ponying up, $25 to get an instructor into your school after school, or even in the morning. If we have parents that are going to come in the morning, the media center is usually available to hold a class for parents. A lot of our schools, I think they rolled out linkages to learning to all of our schools now, or no, it's not. Linkages to learning in some of our schools, mostly the Title I schools. But there are opportunities for you to engage in different ways.
So what I'm hearing, you talked about listening to parents, and you really sort of talked about the same thing in a very practical way. Mm-hmm. My question is, how did you find out? So you're the PTA president,
yes,
right? Mm-hmm. In this community. How did you find out what the needs of your parents are? Like, how did you find out that, other than nobody showing up, that 7 p.m. meetings weren't working, but that 9 a.m. meetings would? Like, some of us think, okay, I'm gonna send out a survey monkey. Like, a survey monkey doesn't work in every community. Some people, I've had times when I've stood out in the other thing I like doing is standing out in the car loop. Like, you learn so much when you get to the car loop. But then that's not a thing in every school, because some schools have a high number of bus riders. So in your instance, how did you find out what those needs were? How did you build those relationships that we talked about?
So for me, I think it's actually just kind of bringing the what's in it for me out in the open. A lot of times, if you are a busy mom or dad, PTA is not at the front of your mind, and you're gonna say, well, that's not important. I'm just, again, busy trying to do life. A lot of times, and for instance, for me, I would let them know directly how PTA is impacting them. For instance, we had a fund where if there were students that were on reduced lunch, so we had a large percentage of students who are farms, but the reduced lunch kids still had to pay 40 cents, and even that is still a struggle for a lot of families. We would go in and we would take care of their lunch accounts. Once a month, we would go in and see who was, delinquent for an extended period of time and allocate funds towards lunch accounts. And those things kind of hit home. When we would say to a parent, look, when a field trip permission slip comes through the door and it's $6, now mind you, $6 is not a lot for a lot of people, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and it's not something that's in your budget,
or if you're furloughed.
And you're furloughed,
right.
Exactly. $6 can be a stretch. And here it is, your child is like, Mom, I need that permission slip. And you're like, and you don't want to say, I don't have the money. PTA will step in, and take care of field trips. And so when you kind of hit home that way, a parent will stop in their tracks and say, oh, okay, I see how this is impacting not only myself, but other people in our school.
So I just want to stop and say, if you have a thought or a question, please come to the microphone so that we can share and hear and engage in that conversation.
And can I just
Please, sure.
connect with the last point, the question around how to know what the parents are curious or what their needs are. And so Action in Montgomery, that I am fortunate to work with, is a community-based organization that works with schools, congregations, individuals who are interested in helping to move the conditions, quality of living here in Montgomery County forward. And so Action in Montgomery did a listening campaign in some of the congregations and institutions that it works with. And one of the things that kept bubbling up for education was out-of-school time programs in high-poverty schools that were elementary schools. So EBB was not necessarily going in many of the Excel Beyond the Bell, was not going into some of these elementary schools, and parents said again and again, we need additional time on task for our children to be able to excel in math, in reading, et cetera, et cetera. And so the parents so Action in Montgomery helped to organize the parents to make their concerns be known to some of the policymakers here in Montgomery County. And I kid you not, again, I'm working on my dissertation, was going around listening to what policymakers were saying, listening to the parents' concern, and the policymakers were basically, had their hands forward, shaking their head. We're not spending a dime more in education. We have this maintenance of effort, and we already are we're not going to spend a dime more. Action in Montgomery was able to put they wanted to get 1,000 parents in the room with the policymakers to show that parents were really fired up and concerned about this. They organized over 1,500 parents and community members, the policymakers. I kid you not, I remember one of them, he came to the mic shaking. I didn't know it was going to be this many parents here. Yes, I'm going to vote for that. And those group of parents were able to get EBB programs started at Burnt Mills Elementary School and South Lake, and they got the council to commit to expanding it 2 per year. And I think it's now at it's now literally at 6 schools that never had this out-of-school time program
because
for their children. Because we pulled those. They listened to the parents, got them organized, and advocated for this is what we need, and we need you all to address our concern.
Which really goes back to PTA's mission of empowering parents and empowering families to help their children. So let me address a couple of things, because we talk a lot, and rightfully so, about high impact schools, schools in communities that have socioeconomic challenges. So that's not all of Montgomery County, right? We know that there are schools that don't have that issue at all. So do they need family engagement? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. What happens, just for a little balance, because clearly we know that there are schools with a lot of needs, but what's going on, okay, I don't want to point out anybody's neighborhood, but what's going on in the neighborhood where parents are working, or maybe mom's at home, parents are wealthy, children have a lot of opportunities, they're going to music class, they have after school activities, but then sometimes there's stress going on, sometimes there are things going on at home, sometimes parents are stressed because, how do you manage all that money? I mean, I don't know. That's not my neighborhood. But how do you manage all that money? I don't know. There are other things going on. So how do we support parents in other communities?
What I was going to say, which also ties into that, a lot of times just speaking to teachers about some of the needs the students have in the classroom will also trickle into how the PTA can lend a hand. And so if you're FaceTiming with teachers, administrators, like you said, being in the school just for a few minutes and kind of looking around and seeing how the PTA can support, those directly affect the classroom.
One thing I know at MCCPTA that we've kind of carved out almost as a place for advocacy for us is mental health and wellness. We just had our mental health and wellness forum, our second annual. There's a lot of stress out there on families, on students, and particularly there's social stress. There always has been, right? Since we were all in school. There's a lot of academic stress.
A lot of academic stress
going on in all communities, but that's something that doesn't only affect highly impacted communities. We have a question, a thought, or a comment? Tell us who you are and...
My name's Amaryllis. I'm at Sergeant Trevor. I'm actually at St. Camilla's. So yeah, we're one of AIM's partners. So Sergeant Trevor is my school, 80% farm. And my son is now in high school. And this year I've put more time into the high school, which was interesting because Sergeant Trevor is over 50% first generation something else, not just Spanish. But we have huge Spanish, huge Amharic, and lots of other stuff. So a lot of my time was being spent, frankly, being Insta interpreter in many ways. Like at the PTA meetings, that was me. Just after school, hanging out at the PCC office, that was me. I actually, the last 2 years, I trained some parents to come and testify. So if you look at the Board of Education back thing, you'll see like the little line of Sergeant Trevor parents who were getting interpreted at the moment. And that's kind of my question, because a lot of this kind of assumes the parents just even know to walk up if you're offering them Dunkin' Donuts coffee in the morning. My first challenge was like, okay, so this is PTA, and this is what, don't run away. I promise I won't bore you. So it's like double education, not just as far as what the PTA does, but how it fits into the greater American educational system, which they've never seen before.
Right.
They don't think they need to advocate, because really, what's advocacy anyways? So it's so kind of, I fried after 5 years. So I guess that's the question, really, when we're looking at this increasingly diverse population, how do you add that extra layer where you're helping the parents? Particularly if you've been down to St. Camilla's Way, that's probably one of the biggest challenges in that parish, like just teaching parents how it all fits and how you need to advocate, which is really a big cultural change.
It is. And why you need to advocate. And the point that you made is well taken. I've had that experience as well, because we can teach people how to come testify at a board meeting, but first we have to explain to them why they need to. So that was a very good point. Did either of you want to speak to that?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. So as you know, I'm from that community, and so that was one of the biggest hurdles that I had, especially relating to a lot of the families there. I think first and foremost, I'm also, first generation. My family is not from this country, my parents, but I was born here. And so that was one of the connections I used to relate to a lot of my families, because I relate to their children. The other thing was that when we start to make those connections, they're thinking about back home. They're thinking about how you send your kids to school. And school, teacher is a well-respected profession, and you do what the teacher says, and you send your child to school, and that's it, and you're at home, and home and school are two separate things. And so the education for us came where we kind of developed a committee of parents who represented different nationalities and ethnicities in our community, in the PTA. They were moms, they were dads, they were uncles that stepped up to help sometimes. They weren't, they couldn't be there all the time, but they were the ones that if I needed to kind of explain the why or the what's in it for me or what does this mean to advocate, that I could call on those folks to kind of come to a meeting and explain, back home, this is how we did things. But here, this is the connection. This is why we need to be involved, because education is not the whole child like it is back home. It's, it's more segmented here, and why we need to have a voice when it comes to education and educating our children. I hope that was helpful.
Hi, I'm Carrie Paulson. I'm the membership chair here, and I spent 7 years at a school that flirted with Title I status, and now this is my first year at a school that definitely does not flirt with Title I status. It has a lot of money. The parents will give any money you want, but the teachers just want food. They don't understand what we're working towards. So at the
PTAs nationwide are the feeders of teachers.
Yes. So at the Title I school, the PTA and the teachers, we did not have time to fight. We just worked together. It was wonderful. My new PTA, I don't even want to be a member at this point, honestly. What I have noticed, the problem is the teachers don't need to understand the students. Like the Title I teachers really need to work hard to figure out what's going on and to figure out how to fix things, how to make a welcoming environment. The other school, the teachers are not following policy. I've been on the phone with the OSSI director several times, which I didn't even know who that was for 7 years at the Title I school. So that is where I kind of wonder what the PTA can do in this school to let the teachers know what their job is. And no, you cannot keep the whole class in for a recess because they were too loud. That's totally against policy. So that's kind of my experience with the two different levels.
Okay, if I could speak to that. So part of what we did is we developed a lot of the Title I schools have developed what they call a sister school. And so typically it would be a school in a different part of the county that would partner on events, or even our kids would go to that school, their kids would come to our school for different things. Their teachers, their parents would come out to our schools. We found that in partnering in that way, that helped bridge the gap with a lot of miscommunication, or just kind of open the doors for opening communication about certain lifestyles, certain cultures, and we felt like it created a partnership. I believe the Sister School program started as just a way for the less impacted schools to help the more impacted schools. And when I started there, I wanted to change that stigma. I wanted it to be a true partnership. Just because these families are of a lower income doesn't mean that they don't have value to offer. And so we worked on building relationships through after-school events, our PTA meetings, our parents. We would organize a carpool to their PTA meeting. They would come out to ours. If they had a science fair, instead of having it at their school, they would have it at ours, because we typically didn't have a science fair. And so I would recommend, if you all do not have a sister school, finding a school in another part of the county that is diverse, different from your school, and partnering them and creating like a sister school program or mentoring program with each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, before you speak, so shockingly, we are winding down, and unfortunately, because I think this is a conversation that could go on all night, but we do have another meeting to transition to. So just as a housekeeping point, let's address, I would love to address your question. We'll give each of you like maybe a minute to give some final thoughts,
Sure.
and then we'll wrap up.
Good evening. My name is Kenge Maliki Dogo Flood. I'm involved in a lot of stuff. And so The discussion about cultural barriers and what parents understand as to what education is for their children and what their expectations are, and that not necessarily being the case in the American school system, has been something that I've worked with my mother in our nonprofit for the African community for over a decade. So and we've been very successful in helping African families transitioning in the U.S. understand, okay, this is a different system. What are we doing as a PTA, or maybe is the school board doing something to get information about the differences in the school systems in the hands of other agencies, like Health and Human Services, when somebody goes in to get rental assistance, or if someone goes in to really deal with some of these life issues, because that's where, you know, they can see the connection. And is there anything in place is really all I need to know. Is there anything in place through MCCPTA, school board, anywhere? We've tried. We have little flyers in French and stuff, but that's all we have.
So if I could, I'm gonna let you answer it also, because you know what you all do better than I know, right? But what I would say is, so that's why, again, I'm calling upon all interested parents to join me in advocating to the Kerwin Commission and to some of these elected officials that they put, you know, I can almost see the hashtag 1% for parents. 1% of this money that they are talking about is gonna make Maryland the first-class educational system. 1% to go directly towards parent needs that are real, on the ground, and so that it would go not only that 1% wouldn't, I'm advocating it wouldn't go to the school system, but let it be an RFP process that third-party, you know, community-based organizations that might not have the same agenda that schools have, that might have a neutral agenda and can be an honest broker to be able to apply for RFP, to have access to some of the funds, to then be able to help parents break down cultural barriers, help parents to listen and hear what parent concerns are, help to bring people together to move the ball forward, to address some of those disconnects that schools don't always pick up on because they have a different thing that they're trying to push. And so again, I think that if we mount a campaign, you know, so I met with some of the Kerwin commissioners, talked with them, they heard what I said, but then when it went to committee, it got scratched. But if they hear more parents saying, no, we want some of the money to go towards engaging and training parents so that we can be not only the child's first teacher, but we can continue to be the teacher of the child, even as, you know, so in the African context, you know, it takes a village and many hands make a light load. So we can work hand in hand with schools to help our children be the best that they can be. But go ahead, I know you want to say.
No, that's fine. And actually, that's going to have to be our final thought because we're getting close. But it's a good final thought, right? Put your money where your mouth is. And here's one example of how you can actually use those funds that you've talked about to really find out who our audience is, which I think was the essence of your question. We can't, if we don't know who we're serving, we have to first sort of identify the breadth of who our community is. Literally about 30 seconds.
Well, I will just say that, I just will say that, you know, again, trying to build a network of just outside of your PTA at other schools is also helpful. I'm here to speak to anybody before the next meeting starts. If you'd like to pick my brain, I'm here to help.
Awesome. So I'm very big on takeaways. You guys have taken your time to come here to share, to listen, and to engage, which is what we're trying to get all families to do, and we appreciate that. So a couple of things that I heard that I think are very concrete that we can use and maybe even take back is to partner with a sister school or a sister PTA in an area that's different than yours. We can obviously all learn from each other. Setting up listening stations. I work with another group that does that, and I think it can be very effective, and it's so simple. Like, you can really get a poster board and say, what's on your mind, you know, so that when people are in the car loop or when they come to school, they can jot a thought, and over time, you're really gonna get a good sense of what the people in your community are thinking about. Use your personal story to connect with people, building those relationships that we talked about earlier. Meeting the needs of your families. As PTAs, we are as we should be very focused on the children, but the children are part of and supported by a family. And in many communities, if we're not addressing the needs of those families, then we're not really going to be addressing the needs of the children. And then finally, helping our parents navigate this very big school system that we're in. MCPS is certainly something that PTAs can do to be helpful. One of the things that MCCPTA is working on, to address your question, is pushing MCPS to focus much more on open data and data in a way that it can be shared and compared across schools and across clusters and not just within a school. But that's another day that we'll have to get into that. Thank you all so much. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so
let's
much,
give them a big
Tracy.
hand. I'll turn it over to Erin.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say thank you again to Tracy Potts for putting this on today and her lovely panel, Tiona Rogers and Abize Sabatar. I have one quote that I wanted to read, and I thought it was very pertinent to what we shared today. Transformation is an ongoing process that tends to appear ordinary when in fact something extraordinary is taking place. So I hope everybody was able to take away something today that will help your PTA. Thank you so much.